The stagecoach careened off the mountain road in a shower of splintered wood and screaming horses, and Vance Thornton Irving heard the crash echo through the canyon, even before he saw the wreckage tumbling down the rocky slope like a broken toy discarded by God himself. He had been tracking a missing horse for the better part of the morning when the sound reached him. That terrible symphony of destruction that could only mean one thing in these unforgiving mountains of Wyoming. His mare danced nervously beneath him as he urged her toward the edge of the ravine, his heart already knowing what his eyes would confirm when he looked down at the carnage below. The coach had come to rest at an angle against a massive boulder, one wheel still spinning lazily in the thin mountain air while smoke rose from somewhere within the wreckage. The lead horses were tangled in their traces, clearly dead from the fall, and the driver lay motionless several yards from the main wreckage, his body twisted in a way that spoke of immediate death. Vance did not hesitate. He guided his mare down the treacherous slope with the skill born of 26 years living in these mountains, his rope already in hand as he navigated between rocks and scrub brush that tore at his leather chaps. When he reached the overturned coach, he could smell the kerosene from a broken lamp mixing with dust and blood and fear. The passenger compartment had partially collapsed, but through the shattered window he could see movement, a flash of dark fabric and then a pale hand reaching toward the opening. He threw himself from his horse and rushed to the door, wrenching it open with strength fueled by desperation. Inside, wedged between a trunk and the crushed seat, was a young woman with long auburn hair matted with blood and dust. Her eyes were closed, but he could see the rise and fall of her chest beneath her torn traveling dress. "Miss, can you hear me?" His voice was rough from the dust, but gentle as he reached for her, assessing the situation with the practiced eye of a man who had pulled more than one injured animal from difficult situations. She was trapped, but the trunk could be moved if he was careful. He braced himself and shoved with all his strength, muscles straining beneath his work shirt until the trunk shifted enough for him to pull her free. She moaned as he lifted her, and her eyes fluttered open to reveal irises the color of summer sky just before a storm. "The others," she whispered, her voice barely audible. "There are no others alive, miss. I am sorry." He carried her away from the wreckage, mindful of how her left arm hung at an awkward angle and the gash across her forehead that still bled freely. He laid her on a flat piece of ground and shrugged out of his jacket to pillow her head, then tore a strip from his shirt to bind her wound. Her eyes followed his movements with a clarity that surprised him given what she had just survived. "Everyone," the driver and the guard both. "I will check for other passengers, but miss, that was a long fall." He moved back to the wreckage and forced himself to look inside more thoroughly. There had been two other passengers, an elderly man and a younger one, both clearly dead from the impact. When he returned to the woman, her eyes were closed again, but tears tracked through the dust on her cheeks. "You are alive," he said quietly, kneeling beside her again. "That is what matters right now. You were spared when the others were not." She opened her eyes again and looked at him with an intensity that made his breath catch. Why? It was a question he had no answer for, at least not one that made sense to speak aloud in that moment. Instead, he said, "Let me get you back to town. You need a doctor and you need to be somewhere safe. Can you tell me your name, Victoria?" she whispered. "Victoria Marie Bradford. I am Vance Irving. I am going to lift you onto my horse now, Miss Bradford. It is going to hurt, and I am sorry for that, but we have about an hour's ride back to Opal, and we need to get moving before the sun gets much higher." He did not mention that the smell of blood would soon attract predators, or that another storm was building over the mountains to the west. She had enough to worry about. She bit her lip when he lifted her, but she did not cry out, and he respected her for that silent courage. He mounted behind her and pulled her carefully against his chest, keeping her broken arm immobilized between them. She was warm despite the cool mountain air, and he could feel her heart beating fast against his forearm. His mare was steady and sure-footed as they began the journey back toward Opal, and Vance found himself acutely aware of every breath the woman in his arms took, as if he could will her to keep breathing through his attention alone. They had been riding for perhaps 20 minutes when she spoke again. "What day is it?" "Thursday, April 18th, 1878. I was supposed to arrive in Opal yesterday. I was coming to be a teacher at the school." Her voice was stronger now, though still threaded with pain. "The school has been waiting for a teacher since last autumn when Miss Henderson married and moved to Cheyenne. The children will be glad you made it, even if you are a day late and somewhat worse for wear." He tried to keep his tone light, but his mind was already racing ahead. The nearest doctor was in Opal, old Doc Brennan, who was half drunk most days, but still the best medical man for 100 miles. The woman would need somewhere to stay while she recovered, and the boarding house was run by Mrs. Sullivan, a formidable widow who would see to her properly. "I do not think I can teach anyone anything right now," Victoria said, and there was the faintest hint of humor in her voice that made Vance smile despite the grimness of the situation. "No, I expect you will need some time to heal first, but Opal is not going anywhere and neither is the school. You focus on staying awake and talking to me so I know you are not slipping away. What should I talk about? Tell me where you came from. Tell me about your family. Tell me anything that keeps you talking." He adjusted his hold on her slightly as the mare picked her way across a stream swollen with snowmelt. Victoria was quiet for a moment, and he thought perhaps she had lost consciousness again, but then she began to speak. "I came from Philadelphia. My father is a minister there, and my mother died when I was 14. I have 2 younger brothers, both studying to follow my father into the church. I became a teacher because I wanted to do something that mattered, something that helped people. When I saw the advertisement for a teaching position in Wyoming territory, it seemed like an adventure, like the kind of thing I should do while I am still young enough to be brave. How old are you, Miss Bradford?" 23. "And you, Mr. Irving?" 26. "I run a small ranch about 5 miles outside Opal. Mostly horses, some cattle. Nothing fancy, but it is mine, or it will be once I finish paying it off." He had never been much for talking about himself, but something about the way she asked made him want to tell her everything. "Were you always a rancher?" "My father was a rancher down in Colorado. I learned the trade from him, but when he died 3 years ago, I decided to strike out on my own rather than try to run his place with my stepmother and her children. We did not see eye to eye on much of anything. So I came north, found this valley, and started building something for myself." "That sounds lonely," Victoria said softly. "It can be, but it is also peaceful. There is something about working the land, about building something with your own hands that feels right to me. I have good neighbors, and I go into town often enough to remember how to talk to people. Mostly." He realized he had been talking more in the last 10 minutes than he usually did in a week, and the thought made him uncomfortable in a way he could not quite name. They rode in silence for a while, and Vance watched the landmarks pass that told him they were getting close to Opal. The distinctive twin peaks that the Shoshone called the Sisters came into view, and then the line of cottonwoods that marked Silver Creek. Victoria had gone quiet again, and when he looked down at her face, he saw that her eyes were closed and her breathing had become shallow. "Miss Bradford, Victoria," he jostled her gently, and her eyes opened slowly. "I am still here," she murmured. "Just tired. Stay with me." "We are almost there." Another 15 minutes and we will have you in Doc Brennan's care. You can rest then, but right now I need you to keep talking. Tell me about teaching. Tell me what you hope to teach the children in Opal." She took a shaky breath. "Reading, writing, arithmetic, history, geography. But more than that, I wanted to teach them to think, to question, to dream beyond whatever small corner of the world they were born into. I wanted to give them the tools to build whatever life they could imagine for themselves." "That is a fine goal," Vance said quietly. "My own education was spotty at best. My mother taught me to read before she died, and I picked up the rest as I went. I wish I had more learning sometimes, especially when I am trying to figure accounts or reading about new ranching techniques in the newspapers." "I could teach you," Victoria said, and then she laughed, a sound that ended in a wince. "If I survive this, I mean. If my arm heals and my head stops feeling like it might split open, I could teach you whatever you wanted to learn." "I would like that," Vance heard himself say, and he meant it with a fierce sincerity that surprised him. This woman, broken and bleeding in his arms, had awakened something in him that he had not even known was sleeping. The first buildings of Opal came into view, the weathered wood structures that lined the main street looking more welcoming than Vance had ever seen them. It was midday, and people were going about their business, but they stopped and stared as he rode past with Victoria cradled against him. He went straight to Doc Brennan's office, a small building attached to the man's house at the edge of town. "Doc," he called out as he dismounted carefully, keeping Victoria secure in his arms. "Doc Brennan, I need you." The door opened and the doctor emerged, a man in his 60s with white hair and tired eyes that nevertheless sharpened with professional interest when he saw Victoria. "Bring her inside, quickly now." "What happened?" "Stagecoach went off the mountain road about 8 miles out. Everyone else is dead. She has a broken arm and a head wound, and she has been drifting in and out of consciousness." Vance carried her into the examining room and laid her on the table as gently as he could. Doc Brennan was already rolling up his sleeves and washing his hands in the basin. "You did right bringing her straight here. Now step back and let me work. You can tell me the details while I examine her." Vance moved to the corner of the room, but found he could not take his eyes off Victoria as the doctor began his examination. He recounted the rescue, the state of the wreckage, the ride back to town. Doc Brennan asked questions in a calm, methodical way, while his hands moved over Victoria's injuries with surprising gentleness. "The arm is definitely broken, and she has a concussion from that head wound. Couple of cracked ribs too, by the feel of it. But you are right, young lady, you are remarkably lucky to be alive." The doctor looked at Victoria, who had been biting her lip through his examination. "I am going to set that arm now, and it is going to hurt considerably. Mr. Irving, hold her shoulders." Vance did as he was told, and when the doctor pulled the bones back into alignment, Victoria's scream tore through him like a knife. But she did not faint, and when it was done and the arm was splinted, she looked up at him with eyes that were dark with pain but still clear. "You were spared for me," Vance said, the words coming out before he could stop them. "I do not know how else to explain it. That wreck should have killed you like it killed everyone else, but you lived. You were spared." Doc Brennan gave him a strange look, but Victoria's expression was something else entirely, something Vance could not quite read. "For you," she whispered. He felt his face heat but did not look away. "I know it sounds presumptuous, maybe even crazy. But when I pulled you from that wreckage, when I saw you were alive, I felt something I have never felt before, like I had been waiting my whole life to find you in those mountains. That is either the most romantic thing I have ever heard, or you hit your head too, Irving," Doc Brennan said dryly. "Either way, this young lady needs rest and quiet, not declarations of destiny." I will keep her here tonight to watch for complications from the concussion. Tomorrow, if she is stable, Mrs. Sullivan can take her in at the boarding house." "No," Vance said, still looking at Victoria. "She will stay with me. I have a spare room and my house is closer to town than the boarding house. I can watch over her, make sure she has everything she needs." "Mr. Irving, I do not think that is appropriate," Victoria said, but her voice was weak. "Perhaps not by Philadelphia standards, but this is Wyoming territory, and practical concerns outweigh propriety out here. Besides, Doc Brennan can come by every day to check on you, and I will make sure you have complete privacy. I am not suggesting anything improper, Miss Bradford. I am simply offering you a place to heal in peace." Doc Brennan looked between them and shrugged. "It is irregular, but he is right that his place is closer, and he does have that spare room. He built it for his younger brother who was supposed to come up from Colorado but never did. As long as you are comfortable with the arrangement, Miss Bradford, I see no medical reason to object." Victoria closed her eyes, and for a moment Vance thought she would refuse, but then she nodded. "All right. Thank you, Mr. Irving. I appreciate your kindness." "It is not kindness," Vance said quietly. "Or not just kindness, but we can talk about that when you are feeling stronger." He left Doc Brennan to finish bandaging Victoria's head wound and went to make arrangements. He stopped at the general store to purchase supplies including fabric for curtains for the spare room to give Victoria more privacy, food staples, and a bottle of laudanum for her pain. At the boarding house, he arranged with Mrs. Sullivan to have some of her spare women's clothes sent to his ranch, since Victoria's trunk had been smashed in the wreck. The older woman gave him a speculative look, but agreed without comment. By the time he returned to Doc Brennan's office, the sun was beginning to set. Victoria was resting on the examination table, her face pale but peaceful in sleep. The doctor gestured him outside. "She needs at least 6 weeks for that arm to heal properly, maybe longer. The ribs will hurt for a good month. The concussion seems mild, but watch for dizziness, nausea, or confusion. Keep her quiet and make sure she eats regularly. And Irving," the doctor fixed him with a serious look, "I know you are a good man, but that girl has been through a terrible trauma. She is vulnerable right now, and I had better not hear any gossip about impropriety." "You will not," Vance said firmly. "I meant what I said. She was spared for a reason, and I aim to make sure she has the chance to heal and figure out what that reason is. If she wants nothing to do with me once she is recovered, I will accept that. But I will not let her face this alone when I was the one who pulled her from that wreckage." The doctor studied him for a long moment, then nodded. "Come back in an hour. I want to make sure she can keep down some broth first, and then you can take her to your place. I will ride out first thing tomorrow to check on her." Vance spent the next hour preparing his mare and a gentle gelding to pull the small cart he used for supplies. He lined the cart bed with blankets to make it as comfortable as possible for the journey. When he returned to the doctor's office, Victoria was awake and sipping broth from a cup that Doc Brennan held for her. "Ready to go, Miss Bradford?" Vance asked from the doorway. She looked at him, and he saw uncertainty in her eyes along with something else, something that might have been curiosity or might have been the beginning of trust. "As ready as I can be, I suppose." He carried her to the cart and settled her among the blankets, then climbed up to drive the team. The ride to his ranch was slow and careful, and the sun had fully set by the time they arrived. His house was modest, a sturdy log structure with a covered porch and glass windows that had cost him a small fortune to have shipped in. He carried Victoria inside and lit the lamps, then took her to the spare room that he had built with such hope 2 years ago. It was a good-sized room with a real bed, a dresser, a washstand, and a window that looked out over the valley. He had hung the new curtains while Victoria watched from the bed where he had placed her, and now the room had a softness to it that pleased him. "This is lovely," she said quietly. "Thank you, Mr. Irving. Vance. If we are going to be living under the same roof, even temporarily, you should call me Vance. Then you must call me Victoria." She smiled, and even through her exhaustion and pain, it was a beautiful smile that made his heart skip. "Victoria," he repeated, liking the way her name felt in his mouth. "I will let you rest now. I will be right outside if you need anything. Just call out." He closed the door behind him and leaned against it for a moment, feeling the weight of what he had done settle over him. He had brought a woman he barely knew into his home, a woman he had told that she was spared for him, a woman who looked at him with eyes that saw too much and understood too little. He had no idea what he was doing, but he knew with absolute certainty that he could not have done anything else. The next morning, Vance woke before dawn as he always did and went about his morning chores quietly, not wanting to disturb Victoria. He fed the horses and the chickens, milked the cow, and started breakfast cooking on the stove. He was frying eggs when he heard a soft sound from the spare room and went to investigate. Victoria was sitting up in bed, looking pale and confused. "Where am I?" "My ranch, 5 miles outside Opal." "Do you remember? The stagecoach accident, Doc Brennan setting your arm, me bringing you here." He kept his voice calm, remembering the doctor's warning about confusion. Her face cleared. "Yes, I remember. I am sorry I woke up disoriented. It all seems like a terrible dream." "I wish it were just a dream. How are you feeling?" "Like I was in a stagecoach that fell off a mountain," she said with a weak attempt at humor. "Everything hurts, but especially my arm and my head. I have laudanum if you need it, but Doc Brennan said to use it sparingly." "Let me help you to the necessary first, and then we can get some food into you. That should help with the pain." He helped her stand and steadied her when she swayed, then guided her outside to the small building that served as an outhouse. He waited a discreet distance away, ready to help if she called out, but she managed on her own and emerged looking slightly more alert despite the pallor of her skin. Back inside, he settled her in the rocking chair by the fireplace with a quilt around her shoulders and brought her a plate of eggs, toast, and bacon along with a cup of coffee. She ate slowly but steadily, and color began to return to her cheeks. "This is good," she said. "Thank you. I am no fancy cook, but I can manage the basics. I will make a stew for dinner that should last us a few days. Tomorrow is Sunday, and I usually go into town for church. I will have Mrs. Sullivan come out to sit with you while I am gone, if that is all right." "You do not have to change your routine for me," Victoria protested. "I am not changing it, just adjusting it slightly. Besides, I want to make sure you are not alone in case you need anything." He sat down across from her with his own breakfast, and found that eating with her felt natural, comfortable in a way that surprised him. They talked while they ate, careful conversation about inconsequential things. She asked about his ranch, and he told her about his horses, the breeding program he was trying to establish, his plans to expand his herd. She told him more about Philadelphia, about her students at the school where she had taught before deciding to come west, about her father's church and the social circles her family moved in. "It sounds like you left behind a good life," Vance observed. "I left behind a comfortable life," Victoria corrected, "but not necessarily a good one. I was expected to marry well, to some man my father approved of, to have children and host teas and never think too deeply about anything important. I wanted more than that. I wanted to matter, to make a difference. Even if it is just teaching a dozen children in a small town in Wyoming territory, at least it is something real." "You matter," Vance said, and the intensity in his voice made her look up from her plate. "You matter more than you know. She held his gaze for a long moment. "You said yesterday that I was spared for you. What did you mean by that?" He set down his fork and leaned forward, elbows on his knees, trying to find the words to explain something he did not fully understand himself. "I have been alone for a long time, Victoria. Not just since my father died, but really since my mother passed when I was a boy. I learned to rely on myself, to not need anyone, to be content with my own company. I built this ranch because I wanted something that was mine, something I could control. But when I found you in that wreckage, when I saw you were alive against all odds, I felt something shift inside me, like I had been incomplete all this time and did not even know it." "That is a lot of weight to put on someone you just met," Victoria said softly, but there was no rejection in her voice, only thoughtfulness. "I know. And I am not trying to pressure you into feeling anything you do not feel, but I also cannot lie and pretend I do not feel what I feel. When I look at you, I see my future. I see the reason I built that spare room. I see the reason I have been working so hard to make this ranch something worth having. I see everything I did not even know I was waiting for." Tears welled in Victoria's eyes. "I do not know what to say to that. I barely know you. I do not even know what I want anymore. Everything I thought I knew ended when that stagecoach went over the cliff. Then we have time to figure it out together. You need to heal, and I need to prove to you that what I feel is real. We can take this as slow as you need. I am not going anywhere, and neither are you for at least the next 6 weeks while your arm mends." He reached out and gently touched her uninjured hand. "I will wait as long as it takes, Victoria. You are worth waiting for." She turned her hand over and laced her fingers through his, and the touch sent electricity through him. "You are either the bravest man I have ever met or the most foolish. I have not decided which yet. Probably both," he admitted with a smile. "But when you figure it out, let me know." Doc Brennan arrived mid-morning and examined Victoria thoroughly, pronouncing himself satisfied with her condition. "The color is back in your cheeks, and your pupils are responding properly. I think you are past the worst danger from the concussion. Keep resting, keep eating, and take it easy for at least a week before you try to do much moving around. Irving, you are doing a good job taking care of her." After the doctor left, Vance helped Victoria back to bed for a nap and then went out to work on his ranch chores. But he found his mind wandering back to the woman in his house, wondering what she was thinking, whether she was comfortable, whether she was frightened or lonely. He had never been responsible for another person's well-being before, and the weight of it was both terrifying and exhilarating. That afternoon, he sat with Victoria in her room and read aloud from the newspaper he had picked up in town the day before. She listened with her eyes closed, occasionally commenting on the news or asking questions about the territory. When he finished, she asked if he had any books, and he brought her the small collection he had accumulated over the years, worn volumes of poetry, adventure stories, and practical manuals on ranching. "I wish I had something better to offer," he said apologetically. "I am not much of a reader for pleasure." "These are wonderful," Victoria assured him, selecting a volume of Longfellow's poems. "Would you like me to read to you?" He pulled the rocking chair close to her bed and settled in. "I would like that very much." Her voice was soft and melodic as she read, and Vance found himself mesmerized not just by the words but by the way she brought them to life. She read Evangeline and the Song of Hiawatha, and when she paused to rest her voice, he realized hours had passed and the sun was setting. "I should start dinner," he said reluctantly. "Let me help," Victoria said, starting to rise. "Absolutely not. You are supposed to be resting. I can manage a stew without assistance." He spoke firmly but kindly, and she settled back against the pillows with a sigh. "I am not used to being idle. It is harder than I expected." Then think of it as practice for something you are not good at yet. Everyone needs to learn to rest sometimes. He left her with the book and went to prepare dinner, but he left her door open so they could talk while he worked. They fell into a rhythm over the next few days. Vance woke early and did his morning chores, then made breakfast for both of them. Victoria would rest in the morning while he worked, and in the afternoon they would sit together, sometimes reading, sometimes just talking. He learned that she loved music, but could not play an instrument, that she was terrified of snakes but fascinated by birds, that she had a sharp sense of humor that emerged when she felt comfortable. She learned that he had a gift with animals, that he could not carry a tune to save his life, that he had dreams of expanding his ranch into something significant, but feared he did not have the education or the social graces to make it happen. They talked about everything and nothing, and with each conversation, Vance felt the connection between them strengthen. On Sunday, Mrs. Sullivan came out to sit with Victoria while Vance went to church. The older woman took one look at the way Victoria's eyes followed Vance as he left and smiled knowingly. "That man is smitten with you, dear," she said bluntly once they were alone. Victoria felt her face heat. "I know. He has been very clear about his feelings." "And what are your feelings, Mrs.?" Sullivan settled into the rocking chair with her knitting. "I do not know," Victoria admitted. "Everything happened so fast. One moment I was on a stagecoach thinking about my new life as a teacher, and the next I was in a wreckage with dead people around me, and then Vance was there pulling me free. He says I was spared for him, that God or fate or something meant for us to be together. Part of me thinks he is crazy, but another part of me wonders if he might be right. What does your heart tell you when you look at him?" the older woman asked shrewdly. Victoria thought about the way her pulse quickened when Vance entered a room, the way his smile made her feel warm and safe, the way his hands had been so gentle when he helped her. "My heart tells me I could love him very easily if I let myself. But my head says it is too soon, that I do not really know him, that I am just grateful to him for saving my life. Your head has a point, but your heart is usually wiser than you think. Give yourself time, dear. You have nowhere to be until that arm heals, and by then, you will know what you feel is real or just gratitude." Mrs. Sullivan's needles clicked rhythmically as she spoke. "For what it is worth, I have known Vance Irving for 3 years now, and he is a good man. Honest, hardworking, kind to those who need kindness. He keeps to himself mostly, but that is just his way. He is not cold, just careful with his trust. If he has opened up to you this quickly, that means something." "I think it does," Victoria agreed softly. When Vance returned from church, he brought news that the stage line had sent men to retrieve the wreckage and the bodies of those who had died. "They asked about you," he said to Victoria. "I told them you were recovering here and would be in touch when you were able. They also recovered your trunk or what was left of it. Most of your things were damaged, but they salvaged what they could. I will bring it by tomorrow." "Thank you," Victoria said. "I should probably write to my father soon. He will be worried when he does not hear from me." "I will bring you paper and pen," Vance promised. "Though the mail only goes out once a week from Opal, so it will be a while before he gets your letter." That evening, Victoria wrote a careful letter to her father explaining the accident and her current situation. She chose her words carefully, not wanting to worry him unduly, but also being honest about her injuries and about Vance's kindness. She did not mention his declaration that she had been spared for him. That felt too personal, too uncertain to put into words for her father's scrutiny. The second week of her recovery brought warmer weather, and the restlessness that came with feeling slightly better but still being confined. Vance could see Victoria struggling with the inactivity, so he began taking her outside for short periods, helping her walk around the yard or sit on the porch in the sunshine. The fresh air and sunshine did her good, and her strength began to return more quickly. One afternoon, as they sat on the porch watching storm clouds gather over the mountains, Victoria asked, "Tell me about your mother." Vance was quiet for so long she thought he would not answer, but finally he spoke. "She was beautiful and kind and strong. She came from back east, from Boston, and she met my father when he was there buying breeding stock for his ranch. Everyone told her she was crazy to marry a rancher and move to Colorado, but she did it anyway. She taught me to read and write, to think for myself, to be kind but not weak. She died of a fever when I was 12, and I think my father died inside when she did. He married again 2 years later, but it was never the same. He was just going through the motions." "I am sorry," Victoria said softly. "Losing a mother is hard at any age, but 12 is so young." "It was a long time ago," Vance said, but his voice was rough with old grief. "What about your mother? You said she died when you were 14. Consumption. She was sick for nearly a year before she passed. I watched her waste away, unable to do anything to help her. That was when I decided I wanted to teach, to do something that would make her proud, that would matter." Victoria stared out at the darkening sky. "My father remarried 2-3 years after she died. My stepmother is not unkind, but we have never been close. She has her own children from her first marriage, and I always felt like an outsider in what used to be my home." "Is that why you came west? To get away from feeling like an outsider?" "Partly, but also because I wanted an adventure. I wanted to prove to myself that I was brave enough to do something difficult, something that mattered. I did not expect my adventure to start with nearly dying in a stagecoach accident, but I suppose that is life. You cannot control what happens, only how you respond to it." "How are you responding?" Vance asked, looking at her intently. "I am still figuring that out," Victoria admitted. "But I think I am glad I am here, even if the circumstances were terrible. I think maybe everything happens for a reason, even if we cannot see the reason at the time." "You were spared for me," Vance said again, and this time Victoria did not protest or question. She just reached out with her good hand and took his, and they sat together in silence as the storm rolled in. By the third week, Victoria was moving around more easily, though her arm was still tightly splinted and her ribs still ached. Doc Brennan was pleased with her progress and said she could start doing light activities as long as she did not overdo it. Victoria immediately announced her intention to start helping Vance around the house. "You are my guest," he protested. "You should be resting, not working." "I am going mad with boredom," she countered. "Please let me do something useful. I can stir a pot one-handed. I can fold laundry. I can sit and snap beans. I need to feel like I am contributing something." He relented because he could see how important it was to her sense of self to be useful. They began working side by side. Victoria seated at the kitchen table preparing vegetables while Vance handled the heavier tasks. They talked while they worked, and Vance found that he loved the domesticity of it. The way Victoria's presence made his house feel like a home instead of just a place to sleep between workdays. One evening, as they cleaned up after dinner, Victoria said thoughtfully, "When my arm heals and I am fully recovered, what happens then?" Vance paused in his scrubbing of the pot. "What do you want to happen?" "I do not know. I came here to teach, and I still want to do that. The school needs a teacher, and I made a commitment. But I also do not know if I should live in town or if there is another arrangement that would work better." "You could stay here," Vance said carefully. "If you wanted, you could continue teaching and living here. It is not that far to ride into town each day." "Vance, we have to talk about the propriety of that. I have been staying here while I recover from serious injuries, and that is one thing. But for me to continue living here as an unmarried woman when I am healthy enough to work would cause scandal, no matter how innocent the arrangement actually is. Then marry me, Vance said, turning to face her fully. I know it is fast. I know we have only known each other 3 weeks, but Victoria, I love you. I loved you from the moment I pulled you from that wreckage. I love the way you think, the way you laugh, the way you challenge me. I love your courage and your kindness and your intelligence. I love everything about you, and I want to spend the rest of my life loving you. Marry me. Victoria stared at him, her eyes wide with shock. Vance, you cannot just propose like that, standing in the kitchen with dishwater dripping off your hands. Why not? Should I get down on one knee? I will if you want me to. He started to kneel and she laughed, a real laugh that lit up her whole face. Stop, you fool. Your knee will get wet. Just stand up and let me think for a moment. She pressed her good hand to her forehead and he could see her mind working. You really mean it? You really want to marry me? I have never meant anything more in my life. I know 3 weeks is not long, but sometimes you just know. I knew the moment I saw you that you were important, that you were going to change my life. I have been alone for so long, Victoria, and I do not want to be alone anymore. I want to wake up next to you every morning. I want to build a life with you, raise children with you, grow old with you. I want everything, and I want it with you. Tears were streaming down Victoria's face now. This is crazy. This is the most impulsive, illogical thing I have ever considered. I barely know you. We have not even kissed. I should say no. I should tell you we need more time, but oh Vance, I do not want to say no. I do not want more time because I already know what my heart is telling me. I love you too. I do not know how it happened so fast, but I love you. He crossed the kitchen in 2 strides and pulled her gently into his arms, mindful of her injuries. Is that a yes? It is insane, she whispered against his chest. But is it a yes? Yes. Yes, it is a yes. I will marry you, Vance Irving, even though you proposed in a kitchen with dishwater on your hands and you have never even kissed me properly. I can fix that last part right now, he said, and he lowered his head to kiss her. It was gentle at first, soft and sweet and questioning, but when she responded with enthusiasm despite her injuries, the kiss deepened into something that made Vance's heart pound and his knees weak. When they finally broke apart, both breathless, Victoria was smiling. That was worth waiting for, she said. We are going to have to wait a bit longer for more than kissing, Vance said ruefully. I want to do this right. We will get married first properly with a minister and witnesses. I am not going to compromise your reputation or give anyone in town cause for gossip. When? Victoria asked. As soon as you are feeling well enough. Another week or 2. We need to talk to Reverend Matthews, make arrangements. I want to do this properly, Victoria. I want everyone to know that you are my wife, that I am claiming you before God and everyone. They spent the rest of the evening making plans, talking about their future with an excitement that felt both terrifying and exhilarating. Vance would continue his ranching, and Victoria would teach at the school. They would build their life together in this house, maybe add on rooms as their family grew. They talked about children, about how many they wanted, about how they would raise them to be strong and kind and educated. They talked until late into the night, until Victoria's eyes were heavy with exhaustion, and Vance insisted she go to bed. I love you, he said as he helped her to her room. I love you too, she replied, and the words felt more real each time they said them. The next morning, Vance rode into town and went straight to Reverend Matthews' house. The minister was a kind-faced man in his 50s who listened with interest as Vance explained the situation. I would be happy to perform the ceremony, the Reverend said. But I have to ask, Mr. Irving, are you certain this is not just gratitude on Miss Bradford's part? She has been through a terrible ordeal and you saved her life. Sometimes people confuse rescue with romance. I thought of that, Vance admitted. But sir, I have spent every day with her for 3 weeks now. I have seen her at her worst, in pain and frightened and uncertain. I have seen her struggle with being helpless, with needing care she is not used to needing. And through it all, I have only become more certain that she is the woman I want to spend my life with. As for her feelings, she is intelligent and thoughtful. She would not agree to marry me if she did not mean it. Very well. When would you like to have the ceremony? 2 weeks from this Sunday, if that works for you. I want to give Victoria time to heal a bit more and to make proper arrangements. The Reverend consulted his calendar and nodded. That should work fine. I will make a note of it. Congratulations, Mr. Irving. I hope you and Miss Bradford will be very happy together. Vance's next stop was the general store, where he purchased fabric for Victoria to make a proper dress for the wedding and supplies to host a small celebration afterward. Word of his impending marriage spread through Opal like wildfire, and by the time he left town, half a dozen people had stopped him to offer congratulations and to express amazement that the confirmed bachelor, Vance Irving, was finally settling down. When he got home, Victoria was sitting on the porch with her book, looking peaceful in the afternoon sunshine. He dismounted and came to sit beside her, taking her hand. It is all arranged. 2 weeks from this Sunday, if that suits you. Reverend Matthews will perform the ceremony, and I have invited the whole town to witness and celebrate with us afterward. The whole town? Victoria looked alarmed. Well, anyone who wants to come. I figure it is a good way for you to meet everyone before you start teaching. Most of them are good people, Victoria. They will welcome you. She squeezed his hand. I am nervous, so am I, but I am also excited. In 2 weeks you will be my wife. 2 weeks until we can really start our life together. Those 2 weeks passed in a blur of preparation. Mrs. Sullivan came out to help Victoria sew her wedding dress. A simple but elegant creation in cream-colored linen with lace at the collar and cuffs. Doc Brennan checked Victoria's arm and pronounced it healing well, though he cautioned her to keep the splint on for at least 2 more weeks after the wedding. Vance worked on the house, making small repairs and improvements, wanting everything to be perfect for his bride. They also continued to learn about each other, asking the questions that would have seemed too intimate before they were engaged. Victoria told him about her fears, her dreams, her hopes for their life together. Vance opened up about his past in ways he had never done with anyone, sharing stories of his childhood, his complicated relationship with his father, his struggles to build his ranch. I am not always going to be easy to live with, he warned her one evening. I am used to doing things my own way and I can be stubborn. I am not looking for easy, Victoria replied. I am looking for real. I would rather have a real life with someone I love, with all the challenges that brings, than a comfortable life with someone I do not care about. You are going to be a wonderful wife, Vance said, pulling her close for a kiss. And you are going to be a wonderful husband, she murmured against his lips. The night before the wedding, Mrs. Sullivan insisted on taking Victoria back to the boarding house to stay, declaring it bad luck for the groom to see the bride before the ceremony. Vance protested, not wanting Victoria out of his sight, but Victoria laughed and agreed to go. It is one night, Vance. I think we can survive being apart for one night. I do not like it, he grumbled, but he helped her gather her things and drove her into town himself. That night, alone in his house for the first time in a month, Vance could not sleep. The spare room felt empty without Victoria in it, and the whole house felt wrong without her presence. He got up before dawn and did his chores, then dressed in his best suit and rode into town well before the ceremony was scheduled to begin. The church was already filling with people when he arrived, townspeople he knew by sight or name coming to witness the wedding. He greeted them as calmly as he could, though his hands were shaking with nerves. Doc Brennan clapped him on the shoulder. "Steady now, Irving. She will be here." "I know. I just want it to be official. I want her to be my wife. In about 15 minutes she will be." "Breathe." When Victoria appeared in the church doorway on the arm of Reverend Matthews, since she had no father present to give her away, Vance felt his breath catch. She was beautiful, more beautiful than he had ever seen her, with her auburn hair swept up and her cream dress bringing out the color in her cheeks. Her left arm was still splinted, but she held a small bouquet of wildflowers in her right hand, and her smile was radiant as she walked toward him. The ceremony was traditional and brief. They exchanged vows, promising to love and honor each other for better or worse, in sickness and health, until death parted them. When Reverend Matthews pronounced them man and wife, Vance kissed Victoria with all the love and passion he had been holding back for weeks, and the congregation applauded. The celebration afterward was held at the church hall, with food brought by what seemed like every woman in town. There was music and dancing, though Victoria could not dance because of her injuries, so Vance sat with her and watched the festivities with his arm around her shoulders, proudly introducing her to everyone as his wife. "Happy?" he asked her during a quiet moment. "Happier than I ever imagined being," she replied. "When I got on that stagecoach in Philadelphia, I thought I was going on an adventure to become a teacher. I never dreamed I would find a husband, a home, a real family." "You were spared for me," Vance said again, and this time it felt like a blessing, like a promise fulfilled. "I think maybe you were spared for me too," Victoria said softly. "I think we were meant to find each other, Vance. No matter how it happened, no matter how unlikely it was, we were meant to be together." "I know we were. I have never been more certain of anything." As the sun set and the celebration began to wind down, Vance and Victoria said their goodbyes and climbed into the cart for the ride back to the ranch. Victoria leaned against Vance's shoulder, tired but content, and he drove one-handed so he could keep his arm around her. When they arrived home, Vance lifted Victoria down from the cart and carried her over the threshold, a tradition he had no intention of skipping. He carried her straight to his bedroom, which was now their bedroom, and set her gently on the bed. "Victoria," he said, suddenly nervous in a way he had not been all day, "I know you are still healing. I do not expect anything tonight that you are not ready for. We have all the time in the world." She reached up with her good hand and pulled him down to sit beside her. "I am your wife now, Vance. I am ready for everything that means. My arm may be broken and my ribs may still hurt, but the rest of me works just fine, and I want to be your wife in every way." He kissed her then, gently at first but with increasing passion as she responded. They helped each other undress, taking their time, learning the shape and feel of each other. Vance was exquisitely careful of her injuries, but he also worshipped every inch of her with his hands and mouth until she was trembling beneath him. When they finally came together, it was with a tenderness and intensity that brought tears to both their eyes. They moved together slowly, learning each other's rhythms, finding the perfect balance of give and take. When Victoria cried out his name in release, Vance followed her over the edge and they clung to each other in the aftermath, both overwhelmed by the depth of feeling between them. "I love you," Vance whispered into her hair as they lay tangled together. "I love you too," Victoria replied. "So much it scares me sometimes." "We will figure it out together," he promised. "Everything we will figure out together." They fell asleep in each other's arms, and when Vance woke before dawn, as he always did, he lay still for a long moment just watching Victoria sleep beside him, his wife. The word filled him with joy and wonder. This woman, this beautiful, brave, intelligent woman had chosen him. She had survived a terrible accident, had been pulled from the wreckage and brought into his life, and now she was his forever. He slipped out of bed carefully, not wanting to wake her, and went to start his morning chores. But he found himself hurrying through them, eager to get back to the house, back to Victoria. When he came in to make breakfast, she was sitting at the kitchen table in her nightgown and robe, her hair loose around her shoulders, looking rumpled and beautiful and completely at home. "Good morning, husband," she said with a smile that made his heart skip. "Good morning, wife," he replied, crossing to kiss her soundly. "How did you sleep?" "Better than I have in weeks, maybe better than I ever have. There is something about being married to you that makes me feel safe." He made them breakfast while she watched, and they ate together as they had so many times before. But now it felt different, special, weighted with the significance of their new relationship. After breakfast, Victoria insisted on helping him with the dishes despite his protests, and they worked side by side in comfortable silence. The next few weeks fell into a new rhythm. Victoria's arm continued to heal, and eventually Doc Brennan removed the splint and declared her fit to begin teaching. The school was a one-room building at the edge of town, and it had been sitting empty since the previous teacher had left. Victoria spent several days cleaning and organizing it, with Vance helping whenever he could spare time from the ranch. When school finally opened, Victoria had 14 students ranging in age from 6 to 15. She threw herself into teaching with the passion and dedication Vance had known she would, and she came home each evening full of stories about her students and their progress. Vance loved listening to her talk, loved the way her eyes lit up when she described a child finally understanding a difficult concept or a shy student finding their voice. They settled into married life with surprising ease. Vance handled the ranch work and most of the heavy household chores, while Victoria managed the cooking and teaching and lighter tasks. They worked together on projects, building a chicken coop expansion and starting a vegetable garden. In the evenings, they would sit together on the porch or by the fire, reading or talking or simply enjoying each other's presence. 6 months after their wedding, Victoria came to Vance with news that made his heart soar. "I am pregnant," she said, her eyes shining with joy and a little bit of fear. "Doc Brennan confirmed it today. I am about 2 months along, so the baby should come in early spring." Vance swept her up in his arms and spun her around, then set her down quickly, afraid he had been too rough. "Are you all right? Should you not be sitting down? Do you need anything?" She laughed at his concern. "I am fine, Vance. Pregnant women do not need to be treated like they are made of glass. I can still do everything I have been doing, at least for now. Doc Brennan said I am healthy and strong, and he expects I will have an easy time of it." "A baby," Vance said wonderingly, placing his hand on her still flat stomach. "Our baby. Victoria, I cannot believe it. I am going to be a father. And I am going to be a mother. Are you happy?" Happy does not begin to cover it. "I am terrified and thrilled and grateful all at once. This is everything I wanted, everything I hoped for when I pulled you from that wreckage. You, a home, a family. It is more than I ever dared to dream." Victoria continued teaching through the autumn and into the winter, though she eventually had to let out her dresses to accommodate her growing belly. The town was excited about the coming baby, and the women especially took Victoria under their wing, offering advice and hand-me-down baby clothes and furniture. Mrs. Sullivan organized a quilting bee to make a quilt for the new baby, and even the shy, taciturn Vance found himself receiving congratulations and back slaps from men who had previously barely spoken to him. As Victoria's pregnancy advanced, Vance became increasingly protective. He insisted she stop riding into town and instead drove her each morning and picked her up each afternoon. He would not let her lift anything heavy or do any task he deemed too strenuous. Victoria tolerated his hovering with good humor, occasionally reminding him that women had been having babies since the beginning of time, and she was perfectly capable. "I know you are capable," Vance said, when she protested his insistence on carrying a basket of laundry. "But I also know how precious you are to me, and I am not taking any chances. Humor me, Victoria. Let me take care of you." "You always take care of me," she said softly, going up on her toes to kiss him. "You have been taking care of me since the moment you pulled me from that stagecoach." "I am the luckiest woman in Wyoming territory." "I am the lucky one," Vance insisted. "You changed my whole life. You made me want things I never thought I could have. You made me believe in happiness." In late February, when the snow still lay thick on the ground but the days were beginning to lengthen, Victoria went into labor. Vance sent for Doc Brennan and Mrs. Sullivan, then paced the living room anxiously while the two of them attended to Victoria in the bedroom. He could hear her cries of pain through the door, and each one felt like a knife to his heart. "This is torture," he muttered to himself. "I cannot just stand here doing nothing while she suffers." "You can and you will," Mrs. Sullivan said firmly, emerging to get more hot water. "There is nothing you can do in there except get in the way. Women's work, Mr. Irving. She will be fine. First babies take time, that is all." It was the longest night of Vance's life. He prayed more than he had since his mother died, pleading with God to keep Victoria safe, to bring their baby into the world healthy and whole. He made bargains and promises, offering anything if only Victoria would come through this safely. Finally, as dawn was breaking, he heard a new sound, a thin, wailing cry that could only be a baby. He froze, listening intently, and then Doc Brennan opened the door with a tired smile. "Congratulations, Mr. Irving. You have a daughter. Both mother and baby are doing well." Vance did not wait for permission. He pushed past the doctor and went straight to the bedroom. Victoria was propped up against the pillows, looking exhausted but radiant, and in her arms was a tiny bundle wrapped in blankets. He approached slowly, almost afraid to disturb the scene. "Come meet your daughter," Victoria said softly. He sat on the edge of the bed and looked down at the smallest person he had ever seen. She had a tuft of dark hair and a red, wrinkled face, and she was perfect. "She is beautiful, just like her mother." "She has your nose," Victoria observed with a smile. "What should we name her?" They had discussed names for months but never quite settled on one. Now, looking at his daughter, Vance knew exactly what her name should be. "Grace. We should name her Grace because that is what she is." "Grace, undeserved and freely given, just like you were, Grace Virginia Irving." "Grace Virginia," Victoria repeated. "I love it. Hello, Grace. Welcome to the world, sweet girl." Vance reached out tentatively and touched his daughter's tiny hand. She gripped his finger with surprising strength, and he felt his heart expand in a way he had not known was possible. This child, this perfect combination of him and Victoria, was his to protect and love and guide. The responsibility was enormous, but he welcomed it with his whole heart. "Thank you," he said to Victoria, his voice rough with emotion. "Thank you for her, for this, for everything." "Thank you for giving me a reason to survive that wreck," Victoria replied. "Thank you for being there, for saving me, for loving me. You were right, Vance. I was spared for you, and you were spared for me. We were meant to find each other and build this beautiful life together." The next weeks were a blur of sleepless nights and endless feedings, and the profound joy of learning to be parents. Grace was a good baby, healthy and strong, and she thrived under their care. Vance discovered reserves of patience and gentleness he had not known he possessed, walking the floor with his daughter at 2 in the morning, singing off-key lullabies that somehow soothed her when she was fussy. Victoria took to motherhood with the same dedication she brought to everything else. She nursed Grace and changed her and spent hours just watching her sleep, marveling at the miracle of this new life. When she finally felt ready to return to teaching 2 months after Grace was born, she arranged with Mrs. Sullivan to watch the baby during school hours, and the older woman was delighted to help. Life settled into a new normal, busier and more chaotic than before, but filled with joy. Grace grew quickly, reaching all her milestones early, and Vance and Victoria watched her development with the fierce pride of first-time parents. The ranch prospered as well, with Vance's breeding program beginning to produce results that attracted attention from other ranchers in the territory. Money was not plentiful, but it was sufficient, and Vance felt the satisfaction of seeing his hard work pay off. When Grace was 6 months old, Victoria discovered she was pregnant again. "I know it is soon," she said to Vance, both of them sitting on the porch watching Grace play with a set of wooden blocks Vance had carved for her. "But I am happy about it. I always wanted several children, and I am glad they will be close in age." "I am happy too," Vance assured her. "Our family is growing, and that is a good thing. This house is going to be full of noise and laughter and love, just like I always hoped it would be." Their second child, a son they named Vincent James Irving, was born the following spring. Vincent was as different from Grace as 2 siblings could be, with fair hair and blue eyes where Grace had dark hair and brown eyes, and a calm temperament where Grace was energetic and curious. Vance loved watching his 2 children grow and develop their own personalities, and he found himself looking forward each day to whatever new discovery or challenge they would bring. Victoria continued teaching for 2 more years, but when their third child, another daughter named Hope, was born, she decided to focus on raising their growing family full-time. "I love teaching," she told Vance, "but I love our children more, and I want to be the one to teach them, at least while they are young. Maybe when they are older and in school themselves, I will go back to the classroom." "Whatever you want to do, I will support you," Vance promised. "You have given me everything I ever wanted and more. If you want to stay home with our children, that is your choice to make." As the years passed, the Irving family became a fixture in Opal. Vance expanded the ranch, adding more horses and cattle, building a larger barn and hiring on a couple of hands to help with the work. Victoria became involved in the community, organizing church socials and helping establish a lending library in town. Their children thrived, growing into smart, kind, capable individuals who reflected the best of both their parents. On their 10th wedding anniversary, Vance and Victoria stood on their porch watching their 4 children, the youngest being 2-year-old Thomas, playing in the yard. Grace was nearly 9 now, tall and confident, organizing her siblings into some elaborate game. Vincent was 7, thoughtful and gentle, carefully building something out of sticks. Hope was 4, energetic and fearless, climbing a tree despite her mother's protests. And Thomas toddled after them all, determined to keep up with his older siblings. "Can you believe it has been 10 years?" Victoria asked, leaning against Vance's shoulder. "Sometimes it feels like yesterday that I pulled you from that wreckage. Other times it feels like you have always been here, like I cannot remember what my life was like before you." Vance wrapped his arm around her waist and pulled her close. "We have built a good life," Victoria said contentedly. "A real life with all its challenges and joys. Sometimes I think about that day on the stagecoach, about how terrified I was as we went over the cliff. I think about the people who died, and I feel guilty that I survived when they did not. You survived because you were meant to, Vance said firmly. You were spared for me, remember. We were meant to find each other, to build this family, to live this life. I have never doubted that, not for one moment. I have not either, Victoria admitted. From the moment you said those words to me, something in me recognized the truth of them. I was spared for you, and you were waiting for me, and together we have created something beautiful. They watched their children play as the sun set over the mountains, painting the sky in shades of gold and pink and purple. The ranch spread out around them, the land they had worked together to improve and expand. The house behind them was full of the evidence of their life together, children's drawings on the walls, toys scattered on the floor, the comfortable chaos of a happy family home. I love you, Vance said, turning to kiss his wife. I will love you until the day I die and beyond. You are everything to me, Victoria, everything. And you are everything to me, Victoria replied. My rescuer, my husband, my partner, my love. Thank you for seeing me that day in the wreckage, for pulling me free, for believing we were meant to be together. Thank you for giving me this beautiful life. They stood together on the porch as darkness fell, their children's laughter ringing through the evening air, and Vance felt a contentment so deep it was almost painful. This was what he had been working toward his whole life, even when he did not know it. This moment, this woman, these children, this life. It had all started with a stagecoach accident and a rescue, with a declaration that must have seemed crazy at the time. But he had been right. Victoria had been spared for him, and he had been waiting for her, and together they had built something that would last for generations. The years continued to pass with the steady rhythm of seasons. The children grew and changed, each developing their own interests and dreams. Grace inherited her mother's love of learning and announced her intention to become a doctor, an ambition that both shocked and delighted her parents. Vincent followed his father into ranching, showing a natural affinity for horses and land management. Hope was artistic, always drawing or painting, seeing beauty in everything around her. And Thomas, the baby, was the family peacemaker, always ready with a joke or a kind word to smooth over conflicts. Vance and Victoria aged together, their love deepening and mellowing like fine wine. They had their disagreements, of course, their moments of frustration and misunderstanding, but they always worked through them, always came back to the foundation of love and respect that had been established from the very beginning. They watched their children become adults, helped them navigate the challenges of growing up, and eventually watched them start to make their own ways in the world. Grace went east to study medicine, one of the few women to do so, and everyone in Opal was proud of her. Vincent took over more and more of the ranch operations as Vance's back began to ache and his joints to stiffen with age. Hope married a photographer from Cheyenne and moved there to pursue her art. Thomas became a teacher, taking over his mother's old position at the Opal School, bringing the family full circle. On their 25th wedding anniversary, Vance and Victoria renewed their vows in the same church where they had first married. The building was packed with family and friends, their children and now their first grandchildren present to witness their continued commitment. When Vance looked into Victoria's eyes and repeated the vows they had first made a quarter-century earlier, he was struck by how beautiful she still was, how much he still loved her. "I was right," he whispered to her after the ceremony, as they stood surrounded by celebrating friends and family. "You were spared for me. We were meant for this, all of it. Every moment, every joy, every challenge. We were meant to face it all together." "We were," Victoria agreed, her eyes bright with happy tears. "And I would not change a single moment of it, Vance. Not the wreck, not the pain, not the uncertainty. It all led me to you, to this life, to this family. I am the luckiest woman who ever lived." "I am the lucky one," Vance insisted, but Victoria just smiled and kissed him, and the argument was lost in the celebration around them. More years passed, bringing more grandchildren, more seasons of planting and harvest, more winters weathered together. Vance's hair turned white and his steps slowed, but his love for Victoria never wavered. Victoria's face acquired lines and her hands grew gnarled with age, but Vance still saw the beautiful young woman he had pulled from a wrecked stagecoach all those years ago. They celebrated their 40th anniversary quietly, just the two of them sitting on the porch of the house they had built together. They were in their 60s now, old by frontier standards, but still healthy and active. Grace had become a renowned doctor and was working in a hospital in Denver. Vincent ran the ranch with his own growing family. Hope's paintings were being shown in galleries across the West. Thomas had married and had 5 children of his own, filling the Opal School with the next generation of Irvings. 40 years, Victoria mused, her hand in Vance's. "It does not seem possible. Where did all the time go?" "It went into building this," Vance said, gesturing broadly to encompass not just the ranch but everything they had created together. "Our family, our legacy. We have children who are changing the world, grandchildren who will continue that work. We have touched so many lives, Victoria. Your students, my ranch hands, everyone we have known. We have made a difference." "We have," Victoria agreed, "but most importantly, we have loved each other." "That is what I am most proud of, Vance. Not the ranch or the children or anything else, but the fact that we have loved each other completely for 40 years. We kept our promises to each other. And we will keep them until the end," Vance promised. "However much time we have left, I will spend it loving you." They sat together as the sun set, content in the knowledge that their love had stood the test of time. They had faced losses and challenges, celebrated triumphs and joys, and through it all, they had remained steadfast in their commitment to each other. The young cowboy who had pulled a woman from a wrecked stagecoach and declared she had been spared for him had been proven right in every possible way. They had been meant for each other, destined to build a life together, and they had done exactly that. As the stars began to emerge in the darkening sky, Vance thought about that long-ago day when he had heard the crash of the stagecoach and ridden to investigate. He thought about the choice he had made to pull Victoria from the wreckage, to take her into his home, to declare his love for her even when it seemed too soon. He thought about all the moments that had followed, building on each other like stones in a foundation, creating the life they now lived. "No regrets?" Victoria asked softly, as if reading his thoughts. "Not a single one," Vance replied firmly. "Every moment, every choice led us here. I would do it all again exactly the same way." "So would I," Victoria said. "I would get on that stagecoach knowing it would crash, knowing I would be injured, because I also know it would lead me to you. You were worth any price, Vance Irving." They kissed then, a soft, sweet kiss that held 40 years of love and commitment and partnership. When they pulled apart, both were smiling. "Come inside," Vance said, standing and offering his hand to Victoria. "It is getting cold and I want to hold you while we sleep. I want to wake up tomorrow morning with you beside me, just like I have done for the last 40 years, and just like I hope to do for however many years we have left." "That sounds perfect," Victoria said, taking his hand and letting him pull her to her feet. They walked inside together, closing the door on the night and the past, looking forward to whatever future remained to them. The Irving Ranch continued to thrive under Vincent's management, and the family name became synonymous with quality horses throughout Wyoming and beyond. Grace's medical practice in Denver treated rich and poor alike, her compassion and skill earning her respect even in a field dominated by men. Hope's art captured the beauty of the West and was collected by museums and private individuals. Thomas's students went on to become lawyers, doctors, teachers, and leaders, carrying forward the legacy of education that Victoria had started. Vance and Victoria became the patriarch and matriarch of a sprawling family, beloved by children, grandchildren, and eventually great-grandchildren. Their home was always open, always welcoming, and holidays brought the entire extended family together for celebrations that lasted for days. They told stories of the old days, of the wreck and the rescue, of their improbably fast courtship and marriage, of the building of the ranch and the raising of their children. "Tell us again about how Grandpa said you were spared for him," one of the great-grandchildren would inevitably ask, and Vance and Victoria would smile at each other and tell the story one more time, never tiring of recounting the moment that had changed both their lives forever. When Vance was 73 and Victoria 70, they decided to take a trip back to the place where it had all begun. Vincent drove them out to the mountain road where the stagecoach had gone over all those years ago. The road had been improved since then, made safer, but the ravine was still there, and Vance pointed out the boulder where the coach had come to rest. "Down there," he said to Victoria, his arm around her shoulders. "That is where I found you. That is where our life together began." Victoria looked down at the ravine, then up at the sky. "I think about the people who died that day sometimes. I think about how random it all was, how I could just as easily have been killed as spared. I think about how my whole life, our whole life together, hung on such a thin thread." "But the thread held," Vance said firmly. "Whatever power governs the universe, whatever hand guides our fates, it made sure you survived. You were meant to live, Victoria. You were meant to be with me, to be the mother of our children, the grandmother of our grandchildren. You were meant for all of it." "I know," Victoria said softly. "I have known it since that first day when you said those words to me. I was spared for you, and you were waiting for me. And together we have lived a life beyond anything I could have imagined when I was that young woman traveling west to become a teacher." They stood together looking at the ravine for a long moment, paying silent respect to those who had died and to the miracle that had spared Victoria. Then they returned to the wagon, and Vincent drove them home, back to the ranch that had been the center of their life together for more than 50 years. Vance died peacefully in his sleep 2 years later, at the age of 75. He went to bed beside Victoria as he had done for nearly 52 years, kissed her goodnight, and simply did not wake up. Victoria was devastated by his loss, but she also felt a deep gratitude that he had gone peacefully, without pain or prolonged suffering. She mourned him deeply, but she also celebrated the life they had lived together. At his funeral, the church overflowed with people whose lives Vance had touched. Ranchers who had sought his advice, townspeople who had benefited from his generosity, family members who had loved him. Victoria stood strong through it all, supported by her children and grandchildren, and when it came time for her to speak, she told the story one last time. "When Vance pulled me from that wrecked stagecoach 52 years ago, he told me I had been spared for him. It seemed presumptuous at the time, maybe even arrogant, but he was right. I was spared for him and he was waiting for me, and together we built something beautiful. We built a love that lasted a lifetime, a family that will continue for generations, a legacy that will endure. I will miss him every day for the rest of my life, but I will never regret a single moment we had together. He was my rescuer, my husband, my partner, my great love, and I was spared for him." Victoria lived another 8 years, surrounded by family and love. She saw more great-grandchildren born, watched her children become elders themselves, and spent her final years recording the family history and stories for future generations. When she died at the age of 78, peacefully in her sleep, just like Vance, it felt like the close of a great story, the final chapter of a love that had defined both their lives. They buried her next to Vance in the Opal Cemetery, under a stone that reads simply, Victoria Marie Irving, beloved wife, mother, grandmother, and great-grandmother, spared to love and be loved. And beside it, Vance's stone read, Vance Thornton Irving, who found love in a wrecked stagecoach and built a legacy that will endure forever. The Irving family continued to grow and prosper, carrying forward the legacy that Vance and Victoria had established. The ranch remained in the family, passed down from generation to generation. Grace's daughter became a doctor like her mother, and her granddaughter after her. Hope's descendants filled galleries with their art. Thomas's line produced teachers and scholars. The family stayed close, bound together by the story of their grandparents' miraculous meeting and enduring love. Every year on the anniversary of the stagecoach wreck, the Irving family gathered at the ranch to remember and celebrate. They would stand together, sometimes dozens of them spanning 4 or 5 generations, and someone would tell the story of how Vance had heard the crash and ridden to investigate, how he had pulled Victoria from the wreckage, how he had declared that she had been spared for him. They would talk about the marriage that had followed, the family that had grown from it, the legacy that continued to unfold. And always, at the end of the telling, someone would say what Vance had said on that long-ago day. She was spared for him. And someone else would add what Victoria had come to believe, and he was waiting for her. And they would all nod and smile, knowing that the love between Vance and Victoria had been something special, something that transcended the ordinary and touched the eternal. The story of the cowboy who wed the woman pulled from the wreckage became a legend in Opal, told and retold, passed down through generations. It was a story of faith and courage, of love declared in the face of uncertainty, of a life built together from the ruins of disaster. It was a story that reminded people that sometimes the worst moments can lead to the best outcomes, that love can bloom in the most unlikely circumstances, that destiny sometimes announces itself in clear, unmistakable terms. And in the quiet moments, when the Irving descendants sat on the porch of the ranch house that Vance had built and Victoria had made a home, watching their own children and grandchildren play in the yard, they would remember. They would remember the cowboy and the woman, the wreck and the rescue, the declaration and the promise. They would remember that love, real love, the kind that lasts a lifetime and beyond, is always worth fighting for, always worth believing in, always worth the risk. Because in the end, that was the true legacy of Vance and Victoria Irving. Not the ranch or the family name or the material success, though all of those were part of it. The true legacy was the proof that love could conquer anything, that two people brought together by tragedy could build something beautiful, that destiny was real and powerful and worth trusting. They had shown everyone who knew them that when you find the person you are meant to be with, when you recognize them despite the circumstances, when you have the courage to claim them and commit to them and build a life with them, miracles can happen. Vance had been right on that April day in 1878 when he pulled Victoria from the wrecked stagecoach and told her she had been spared for him. She had been spared, preserved through a disaster that killed everyone else, given a second chance at life for a purpose. And that purpose had been to love Vance Irving, to be loved by him, to build a family and a legacy together, to show the world what real, enduring love looked like. It was a story for the ages, a love for the ages, a legacy that would endure as long as people believed in the power of love to transform lives and create meaning from chaos. And in Opal, Wyoming, where it all began, the Irving family made sure that story was never forgotten, that the love of Vance and Victoria was always remembered, always celebrated, always held up as an example of what was possible when two hearts recognized each other across the wreckage of the old life and chose to build something new together. The cowboy wed the woman pulled from the wreckage, and he said she was spared for him. And in saying it, in believing it, in living it every day of their long lives together, Vance and Victoria Irving proved that some love stories are not just tales but truths, not just romances but realities, not just dreams but destinies fulfilled. Their love had been written in the stars, or in the hand of Providence, or in some force that brought the right people together at the right time for the right reasons. Whatever it was called, whatever form it took, it was real and it was lasting, and it was the foundation of a family that would continue to grow and thrive for generations to come. All because one man heard a crash in the mountains, rode to investigate, and found not just a survivor but his destiny waiting for him in the wreckage.